Thank you all for coming, and thanks to people who registered for the webinar, who I know are from all around the places. It is my pleasure to be here, especially as Eileen said. I came here 3 years ago to work with Larry Zifford at the IOE department, right next door. And it has been a very special year for me. I have came with an idea to write a book, and I thought it would take me a year to finish. But fortunately or unfortunately, I found here so many interesting things that instead of sitting on my book, I was like a sponge going into different places and learning what people are doing here. And one of them was Center for Entrepreneurship, where I met Eileen and Thomas Zrubushin. And it just indulged me into how this great research university is trying to reinvent itself into becoming much more entrepreneurial. And what I found most startling was that this was coming from bottom up, from the students who were pushing for more entrepreneurial experience, from the top down, from the president of the university and from the deans of the business school, I know the medical school and College of Engineering. And I was trying to understand how these dynamics work because it was related to my work that I do in Europe. But before I get into this, let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of Siemens? Siemens, right. Have you heard of Reuters?
Yes.
Right. Have you heard of Nobel, the Nobel Award?
Yes.
Right. Now, tell me what are these names? Well, Siemens is a company, right? Reuters, it's a company. Nobel Award, well, it's a well-recognized research award in the world. But when we think of these words, very rarely we think that these are names of real people. People who are great European entrepreneurs. They started their businesses in Europe, quite often a small entrepreneurial family business, and then grew it through the Industrial Revolution into the multinational global corporations. Now, when we look at some data, we realize that before 1925, out of the pool of most innovative companies measured by market capitalization and investment in R&D, 86 were coming from Europe. Today, it's 2%. So you see what happened in between this 100 of years. Now, I must say that coming from Poland, which is one of the most successful emerging markets in Central and Eastern Europe, I asked myself a question, well, why Poland is doing well? What has happened over my generation, the last 25 years of my professional career, that my country has went through this transition? And the answer was very simple for me. The answer was entrepreneurship. If we didn't have the entrepreneurial spirit, the entrepreneurial people, the new startups which grew into big Polish, then regional, then global companies, we would have never become as successful as we are. And let me tell you that from 2008, when the financial crisis started in Europe, which later grew into economic crisis, social crisis, political crisis, which recently you probably heard, shaked all the Eurozone, Poland has been the only country with positive GDP growth. So many people ask me, why is Poland doing so well? And I will tell you the answer at the end of the presentation. So why did I embark on this intellectual journey to write my book? Well, out of many hats that I wear in my work, one of them was a business hat. I worked for a venture fund, for an investment bank. I had my own consulting company, and I witnessed many failures. At certain point, companies failed, project failed, teams failed. And I asked myself a question coming from the business practice. Why is that so? Failure fascinated me much more than success because there was something that made me ask, could I have done something differently? Could other people have done something differently? And just to give you some details, 3 of the venture-funded companies failed. In telecom business, they had a very unique IP. Well, they did not manage to provide their technology, the last mile solution, in a good enough time to meet the customer needs. Another company developed software. 40 engineers were working on an ASP solution. What happened? Well, the investors didn't agree with the original funder how to build the company further. Another one was building the web marketing platform. What happened there? Well, the CEO was not able to take this company to the next stage beyond getting the initial funding. And I was curious. I was curious why companies fail. But later, I looked into this and I realized that it is human creativity. When you strip all other things, it's the human creativity which can translate into innovation and then translate into entrepreneurship and deliver results. So I was curious, where does innovation come from? And I came, as you may see here, into different areas, different settings where I saw innovation happening. I went to universities like University of Michigan. I went to public sector, looked into what are the policy initiatives. I went to industry. I looked into NGOs, how innovation happens, how users drive innovation. And my next motivation for starting it was that in 2008, exactly when the crisis started in Europe, I joined a new institution, European Institute of Innovation and Technology. And what we have been trying to do was to understand how we can help Europe redesign its management, the system, the management system, the financing system of innovation to help reinvent the economy. Now, when you look at how innovation is generated in our global networked world, we know that there are different settings, but we also know that it happens in certain places in the world, right? And we call them clusters or innovation milieu, where certain institutions and certain people are co-located. And there is a dynamics that allows them for the synergy and for this collective creativity to happen. Innovation has been traditionally defined as new products, services, processes, developing new markets. But what I realized looking into this innovation settings is that actually innovation is a social process, is a human interaction during which something magical happens. This creativity translates the collective existing knowledge into new capacity to develop these products, processes through a collective learning. And I started to think about innovation as a collective, shared, emerging capacity to learn, which is a bit different than thinking about it as an outcome, right? So this also gave me understanding that many people, especially coming from the engineering schools, think of innovation as technology. We say innovation, and they understand technology. I'm not an engineer. And this is a bias. And bias because then you start to think that instead of where innovation comes from, where does innovation come from, you think, where does technology come from? But then, will technology help you start a company? Sure it will. But will the technology help you to make it ultimately successful for shareholders, for funders, for customers, for users? Well, not necessarily. There are other things coming in. Most of them are non-technological. They are organizational, they are linked to marketing, but they are also linked to very different approach of what innovation can be. For example, a social innovation or cultural innovation or cost innovation, things that we not necessarily appropriate as immediately being the source of value creation, especially in the engineering culture. What I've also realized actually is that while innovation is happening in certain places, what I witnessed was that it was not the places, the spirit of the places or this ecosystem in itself, like Michigan or like Silicon Valley or many different places, that created the innovation. It was the connection between the systems that the innovation was coming from. So this is why this little model shows that actually in a current global world, it is not the cluster, an isolated island, which is the source of innovation. It is this networking capacity to commute, to communicate, to get synergy between different clusters. If this is so, what are the necessary components, then I asked, of the innovation process in this environment that are conducive to creating value? And in every of these places, there was a great research university, or many of them. There was research, strong research culture, and there were all these different innovation settings where innovation happened. And we have it all in Europe. Well, Europe is well known for its research output. It's well known for its old institutions, and it's known for its large corporations that have been very successful over the last 100 of years. But still, something is missing. And I asked myself a question: what actually is the missing component of the innovation model? Coming from the emerging market, as I said, it was obvious that this is entrepreneurship. But the real question was that while if you look at emerging technologies, emerging economies in transition, you see this entrepreneurial culture. But once we developed a certain stage, the entrepreneurship that managed to take us to this level is not necessarily the same entrepreneurship. And on top of this, there is no link, usually, or not mature link, between this element and the academia, for example, or the industry. So definitely the question then was, what is this entrepreneurship? How to link, how to embed it into the mature economies of Europe? Now, the missing link. If entrepreneurship is the missing link in this, let's call it a knowledge triangle of research, universities, and innovation settings, what does it mean if these elements are so separate? And it comes down to a basic question: how value is created? But one question now. Value in academia is a different model. It has a different understanding in terms of scientists are rewarded for publishing. The educators, the universities are rewarded and ranked by their students if they can get the quality education to prepare them for the job market. So there are two different, conflicting often, incentive systems. So value means something different. In innovation settings, the government, which is innovating, is doing this for the society, for the taxpayers. So the values are rather social. The value is defined in social terms as job creation, for example, or economic growth, development. But for industry, they care about shareholders, right? So they care about the bottom line. And why would they take this model? What would they want entrepreneurship to get integrated? Well, this brings me back to the question of this networked culture, networked nature of innovation. What I realize is that when we have these clusters or innovation hubs, there are different kinds of exchanges that happen between them. And I realize that there is knowledge which flows, for example, sharing of publications or patents. There are people with their skills who commute, who emigrate, who go to study abroad, who decide to go to invest in countries offering better opportunities. And And there's also capital, free capital which flows. The venture industry can invest in one place but source deals in another. And I realized that this value creation is linked to the flow of specific type of people, specific type of capital, let's call it entrepreneurial capital or smart capital, high-risk capital, and specific type of knowledge which is relevant to users, to customers, to society at large, not knowledge as a purpose in itself. And then I realized that what is happening is that these entrepreneurial resources, let's call them this way, are accumulated in certain places and not in the others. And I try to understand if these resources get accumulated and if these different stakeholders, business, academia, government, are looking into different value systems, how this all makes sense for innovation and entrepreneurship to be a solution to the problems Europe is facing. That is, lack of sufficient number of entrepreneurial, of innovation-driven entrepreneurial ventures for job creation and for economic growth and development. Because it does concern not only me, but it concerns the next generation. It concerns my children. So I looked into the theory of networks and I realized that networks have always been a form of social organization, right, from ever. But what happened in the current world is that these networks have gained a different dimension. Because of its real-time, simultaneous nature enabled by technology, they induce a very different dynamics to the flow of these three types of resources. Just let me tell you about few phenomena which I found fascinating. One of them was that where different types of networks, of innovation networks, overlay one over another, the resources find a capacity to switch if there are people who have the ability to communicate between the network. And now, everyone today has an ability to mass communicate. Everybody can send a message which will read potentially millions of people. But innovation happens in this periphery of networks, in small nodes, but resources get accumulated in these mega nodes because exactly of the ability of different networks to overlap. And they all take value from this overlapping. Let's say it is a network of industry association. It is a network of venture capital. It is a network of researchers. It is a network of student associations. And different projects enable the processes within this multi-layering networks. Now, knowing this, the question was, so what could we do to have any influence on these very complex phenomena? And one solution is an experiment that has been developing in Europe over the last years with a new type of innovation network, which is innovation network, bringing stakeholders from academia, that is universities, bringing large companies, bringing researchers, and putting them into an open and structured platform for collaboration on projects. So imagine that you have 5 or 6 nodes, like this. However, they are linked formally and informally. Formally, through an agreement to align towards a certain goal. Let's say that this is a company which decided to bring profit. And through integrating the resources available in this net. So One of such an experiment has been funded 2 years ago. It is called Kick Energy, and it's one of the 3 existing knowledge innovation communities. What is a community? Community is an open innovation environment, but because it is a for-profit company, it allows often competing partners to collaborate, to understand better where the market is going, where the technology is going. It allows students to go from one university to another and get joint degrees. It allows entrepreneurs to get exposure and access to customers in different places in Europe. Why would the policymakers be interested in starting such a network? Would they be? Is Michigan doing this with the big push on entrepreneurship? Probably not. There is a Europe-specific model which strongly is linked to the policy culture in Europe. And in this case, in particular case of the Kick Energy that I'm referring to, the business model for this company is to create value over a certain period of time, seven years' time, and create companies in return for helping them to get their first customer. On top of this, the role of the policymaker here is to enable them to have this social component, the stability first, to conduct research over a long period of time, but also to educate students with a very different degree, and this is through a long-term granting process enabling them the stability to operate for 7 years' time. This has been my experience, trying to understand how innovation works, where does it come from, what is the link with innovation and entrepreneurship, and how this can be relevant to people who are trying to start their businesses, to industry leaders who ask themselves a question how to reinvent their companies, and to many other stakeholders involved in this complex network of networks globally. Now what I would like you to do, looking at the clock, is to get in little groups of 3, and think for 5 or so minutes about what questions do you have that you could better understand my lecture, and then let's have an open discussion. Let's restart, and please remind me to tell you the story, okay? At the end, about why Poland is doing so well. So who would like to ask the question first?
My name is Rick Bollinger. I'm a local entrepreneur management consultant. I'm curious about the European model of, you said it was more of a policy model. The point that I want to question is, I think that's totally lacking in America. That the state might have this underlying infrastructure for entrepreneurship, but they don't provide a lot of heavy policy or support for individual entrepreneurs. They sort of support the community, but much of what an entrepreneur gets in terms of resources is based on milestones and performance and things that are, I suspect, are absent in blanket support for individuals. And I'm just looking to confirm or change my opinion.
Well, I think you're very right, and I think that there is a complex number of issues why policy is playing such a different role in Europe than in the US. But it has good and bad sides, right? So it has an upside and a downside. And I believe that indeed the status quo, the approach to innovation at the policy level, both in Europe and in America, needs to be reinvented, needs to be rethought. In Europe, there is a big debate how to better utilize resources available for research and innovation and support to entrepreneurship through public funding, for example, how to make it more effective. And it goes along the lines that rather than stimulating the capacity building, it should go into the output and impact and focus on results. So this would be one of the shifts. Another shift, very interesting, is to include education at a systemic level into research and innovation. So stimulate environments, networked environments, which allow the students to have a much bigger interference with the real life development in the industrial setting and in the research setting. So integrating this through projects which are not only local or bilateral, as there are many examples of such, but which are also international, so pan-European, have this dimension, and which are allowing students to commute, to have an exposure to a project in Berlin, but also in Helsinki and in Paris, to go to Grenoble and to Barcelona, or to go to Zurich and to London, or in Krakow in Poland. And thus students working on projects in different teams, having different sponsors of local partners, get a very different kind of education. They are exposed to dealing with problems and trying to look for solutions in very different teams than they would be working or starting to build their careers only in one of these countries. This would be the second development. As to the US, well, indeed, Europe is stronger in that its innovation policy has a long-term horizon. The thinking goes along the budgetary planning for 7 years' time. So many organizations are able to better structure their long-term goals. And this is relevant, especially as thinking in Europe how to leverage its capacity, its innovation capacity, and how to utilize it for the cause. In Europe, the thinking goes along what we call the grand challenges, such as future information communication society, or sustainable energy, or climate, and integrating the resources along this line, interdisciplinary, transversal, allows to get better synergies. As far as I know, this kind of thinking is not present in the US. However, entrepreneurial culture is much more natural on this part of the Atlantic, right? So the second thing is, in the morning there was a presentation where an army research officer, I understand, presented what army is doing as a sponsor for research. In Europe, this is simply absent. To the degree, definitely, that is in America. So these are two different worlds. But I believe that this transatlantic cooperation would be beneficial for both, so the learning would go both ways. Because what we cannot do, basically, we cannot afford to do nothing. The status quo is simply not an option anymore. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering if you could give an example of a mega node, emerging node, and peripheral node in the landscape of the University of Michigan, if possible.
University of Michigan, I think, is embedded in an excellent way through different networks of, let's say, engineering research globally, through medical research globally, through business school research globally. What I've been looking here is that I found surprising to me lack of perception that these networks overlap. So they were on top of each other, but what was lacking was the switching capability. So there was not really much synergy that I witnessed. And when I came here and I came to the College of Engineering and I was looking at this entrepreneurial spirit and the policy and the newly appointed dean, deputy dean for entrepreneurial studies, and the students who wanted to 4,000 students, I believe, wanted to take the course. The pitch competition was 1,000 at the time, or 1,500. I was amazed by the spirit. And then I went to Ross Business School, and I was at some time with the Zalora Institute. And I witnessed that they have an amazing thing, 3 venture funds, that students can understand and can learn a venture industry being at school. One of them is a social venture fund. It's an absolute novelty. And then I talked with some people at the medical school, and it turned out that, again, they're trying to look how to start companies out of the research that they are developing. And the president of university openly adopted, sponsored the association, the Entrepreneurial Association. The Association of Students from China was bringing outstanding Chinese entrepreneurs to University of Michigan. And I was attending this, being interested in entrepreneurship, but I wouldn't meet the same people in all different places. There were separate groups of people. And I realized that my perception of University of Michigan becoming a mega node is quite elude, because there is silos which are present in these different environments. What I found lacking is some capacity to integrate, to communicate, to bring these resources together. And we've spoken with Eileen that this is indeed not easy to enable a network, to give the power, to empower a network, to develop this capacity to become a mega node, because you have it all here. You have it all. Yeah.
So can you give an example of another place you think is a mega node that's been able to overcome these problems switching between layers?
There are 3 networks that I have been studying, and I had a privileged position because being part of the governing board of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, we were also developing a conceptual model. And I would say, so what would be a kind of model for a network actually to transform the nodes into peripheral to emerging, and then from emerging to mega nodes. And looking into this 3 networks which were established, Climate Kick, which deals with challenges in climate mitigation adaptation, with EIT, ICT Labs, which tackles opportunities in the area of future information and communication society, and the Kick Energy that I mentioned that deals with challenges in sustainable energy. I would say that there are 4 components which make these networks well, I would not say already successful, but there are some early results that are bringing better outcomes than the existing networks. And I would say that the first one is the governance structure. And this means basically that certain decisions can be taken quicker than when the governance structure is ineffective. And to enable a governing structure, you need some legal form of a collaboration. And what all these 3 networks have a 7-year time partners agreement, which gives them stability. There is a clear incentive system, so the partners know what they should contribute, what their rights are, and what their obligations are. They are governed by a professional chief executive officers. So there is a person who is a network orchestrator. It's a clear hierarchy, and at the same time, lack of hierarchy, because anyone in the network can start another project, can start a different sub-network. What I would also say is important that is a balance between the stakeholders, the partners, shareholders, members. So there are universities, these are industry, there are research institutes, there are governments, there are stakeholders who are needed to bring a solution. If you want to implement a solution related to climate mitigation, you cannot do it unless you have certain infrastructure enabled or funded by the municipality, right? It's not enough to have a good idea or be, a well-managed business. You need to have a good research or technology, but you need to bring together the stakeholders. So if they're partners, there is a very different level of governance It's much more than the commercial level. So this would be the first element, the consortium with a clear governance structure. The second would be an organizational model. If a network is too much spread, too thinly distributed, it is not manageable. So it needs to be integrated. It's, well, we cannot say that this is integrated or not when we know when it works or not. But let's say that you have 5 or 6 nodes in Europe. As I mentioned, in major hubs where innovation is already present. So this is not a green field development. You have your headquarters in one place and then offices in 5 other places. And there is a management structure with a CEO at the top, an innovation officer, a science officer, entrepreneurship officer who are responsible for managing this company, this organization. The next critical thing is a business model, in that if there is no value proposition and not a business case, why would such a network be sustainable? Sustainable in a short term, so there must be a business proposition for the partners, or for the market, or for the society at large. Somebody must be able to use and pay for these services, solutions provided. But also, there must be a way of thinking that when the public support is gone, and these networks get up to 25% of funding from public money, from the EIT, when this is gone, they still can be sustainable. So it's not thinking in terms of spending public money or budgetary thinking, which was very prevalent in Europe, and which is definitely a weakness. But there must be a business thinking that such a partnership must have a value proposition. An example would be to integrate value chain where none of the partners would be able to provide a complex solution. And the last component is this entrepreneurship in what I mentioned, what I call the knowledge triangle, the education, research, and innovation settings. And these are projects where students are involved in real life experiments and developing, co-creating products with industry and with researchers, so that there are spin-offs and startups coming out with a very strong entrepreneurial focus and orientation what should be the outcome. And it's not only about starting a business, but it's also about having an environment where you can build on it. For example, the KIK InnoEnergy developed a model which is called Innovation Highway. They have 6 nodes, 6 entry points for an incubator where they locally search for interesting ideas, interesting ventures. They grow them into their network, offering to provide their first customer, which is feasible because all major European energy companies are shareholders in this KIK InnoEnergy, right? So they have a real value proposition. They bring an emerging entrepreneur, an emerging venture with the first customer, right? The risk here, of course, is whether these companies will not be bought up too quickly, whether they would not rather grow up instead of being bought at a very low valuation at a very early stage, but this is a different story. A climate KIK has a model called sheltered innovation. Energy is a well-established business, but climate as an industry is still trying to find its way beyond the public subsidies. So what they discovered is that many of their members are actually do care about going green. They care about sustainability. One of their students, the company is called Naked Energy, developed this solar solution. And it turned out, surprisingly, that another member of their network, a chain of big supermarkets, wanted to deploy them. So just because their customers wanted the supermarket to be green, to be sustainable. And this is what happens in the network. All these different connections through entrepreneurship are building value for the planet, for the entrepreneur, for many different stakeholders involved in this process. So these are 4 elements, I would say: a legal and governance structure, operational model, a business model, and this entrepreneurship in the knowledge triangle as a portfolio of projects with a very clear objective to create new companies and grow them. Any other questions? I think we're coming to the end. The story. Eileen, you were to remind me of a story. So quite often I'm asked why Poland has had a positive GDP growth throughout the crisis, whilst the rest of Europe has gone into stagnation or negative GDP growth. And I've been asking many people because I simply didn't know the answer. And here I could stop. But I actually asked a friend, a venture capitalist who came to Poland back early in the mid-90s. And I said, Doug, what do you think? Why Poland is doing so well? You've been here for the last 20 or more years. And he said, the same as I did. Daria, I don't know. But then he gave it a little more thought and he said, look, when I came here in 1996, a taxi driver took me from the airport to the hotel downtown. And I spoke with him. He had known little English, and I was just knowing 3 words in Polish. But I asked him, what do you need to change in Poland? And he said, everything. And Doug said, and this is why you're so successful. So I believe that if Europe wants to be successful out of this crisis, maybe the answer of a taxi driver in many different countries should be, what to change? Everything. Thank you so much.
If you listen to customers, will they tell us what we need to know, or will they give us short-sighted answers that curb our creativity? Do entrepreneurial opportunities materialize themselves to only a lucky few through a moment of inspiration?